All right, everybody, welcome to today's free Nectari training. We're really excited about today because we're going to be going through the universal data models with you, which is, some of you may already know them, a pretty recent addition to the Nectari software. So again, giving you more dashboards, reports, pre-built KPIs out of the box, very intuitive, very complete offering when it comes to the universal data models. So we're really looking forward to this session today. Jean-Guy, if you wouldn't mind just changing to the next slide. There we go. It's happening. All right. My name is Olivia. For those of you who have heard my voice on the previous sessions or have known me in the past, hello to everybody. I manage business development for North America. And today, I believe we're at the last session at this point. And we obviously saved the best for last, right, Jean-Guy? So Jean-Guy will be presenting and training you guys today, again, on the universal data models. So just a few items when it comes to the housekeeping for this session. Jean-Guy, just the next slide, please. So your microphones will be muted, but Jean-Guy will be stopping periodically to take questions, whether they've been typed into the chat box or you want to ask them in person. Jean-Guy will be taking some time, giving himself a break to take your questions. So no worries there. Again, you can type them into chat as we go along. The session is 2 hours long. Just so you guys know, I say this every time, the training sessions will be recorded and shared with yourselves so that you can actually share them with your colleagues, re-listen to them in the future. I think that's pretty much sums it up. So I will pass it over to Jean-Guy and just want to say thanks again for those of you who attended all the sessions. If this is your first session because you're interested, really interested in the UDMs, welcome. And again, thank you guys so much for taking the time. I've repeated myself a few times about this, but we're using this as an opportunity to reconnect with our customers who we aren't able obviously to see right now, and we may not be able to see for a while. So we're really happy to get connected with you, to share some of the new stuff as well that's available within Nectari that you can start utilizing. And we hope you really enjoyed today's session, and I'll be back with you for a few announcements at the end of Jean-Guy's presentation. So I'm leaving you in great hands with Jean-Guy, and again, enjoy the session.
Thank you, Olivia. So my name is Jean-Guy, everyone. I think I met a few of you that are on the line right now. I hope you're all doing well. Just for one little clarification, this is not the last session. There's still one more next Tuesday on the data sync and on the new features in V9. So you guys are all welcome to join us next week, of course, with still me again, that's going to be presenting the other day. So today we're going to be reviewing the UDM, so the Universal Data Model. And we're going to go over the new enhancements we've done to the finance one. We're going to talk about the sales CRM with forecasting attached to it now that we've implemented. And we'll also be talking about the new UDM inventory that we have available. And the UDM is something that we're constantly working on. And it's really something that we're going to be developing more and more to be able to give more enriched reports from day one. So whenever we talk about the universal data model, we talk about a few key points. So for example, when we talk about universal data model, it's a data model that can connect to multiple sources. So for example, our key at the moment is to try to envelop more and more ERP systems to be able to report off. So right now we can see that we're integrated to Sage EM, which is X3, Sage 100, 300, 500, Salesforce, Sales CRM. So we're constantly adding more ERP systems and more databases into our portfolio to be able to make the universal data model speak more. So it's there to be able to interconnect these multiple different systems into one reporting solutions by bringing in dimensions together into one final centralized locations. And as we can see, we're also working at getting more systems in place. So like Intact, Sage Business Ones, Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics AX, and Nav also. So they're all things that we're constantly working on and we're going to be increasing the amount of out-of-the-box data models that we connect to with the universal data model in the future. If ever you have systems in place that you would like us to add onto this list, just communicate with Olivia your needs, and then we'll maybe add it eventually to the pipeline to adding more of these universal data models in the future. So it's really there to consolidate sources together and also to be able to give you meaningful KPIs from day one with the least amount of effort in creating them. So we'll just move on to the next slide. So the first one we're going to really be looking at, which we're going to look more in depth versus the other one, is really the finance UDM, where we're going to look at how we map the chart of account, how we can map the analytical dimensions, show how it's customizable, show how we can add currency conversions, really work with the AR AP, and so on. So whenever we install the financial universal model, we have some pre-built dashboards that come with it. So we'll have a lot of meaningful KPIs that are attached to it with minimal intervention from the customer at the beginning. So it's not a question of building 1,000 reports for you. It's really from day one, as long as we do a few steps beforehand, we can have over 100 different meaningful KPIs available to you as long as we do a few steps beforehand. So these kinds of KPIs can be something like accounts payable turnover, debt to capital ratio, working capital ratio, and things like that, with gross margin percentage, of course, and so on. So basically, what we do with the universal data model for finance is that we build the chart of account inside of Nectari. The reason why we do that is because every customer / every system has different types of chart of accounts set up inside their system. So building it inside of Nectari will really allow us to create meaningful reports from day one, since we're already using our pre-built logic to calculate all of these difficult KPIs to calculate. So what I'll do is I'll exit this screen right here of the presentation, and I'll go into our Nectari website to show you a little bit more about what these reports give us. Let me just hide this right here. So I'm just logging into the latest version with the templates installed. So I'm just going to log into the application, where we'll see I have a universal data model folder right here, which will contain inside of this all of the universal data model configurations, reports, and so on. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to start by just opening up the dashboards, because the dashboards have a lot of meaningful objects inside of them. And then I'm going to show you guys how we configure them to get to the result to show on the screen. So right now, I'm just going to open the most basic one, which is the Chief Financial Officer. And it's going to populate a dashboard with a lot of meaningful information inside of it. So I'm just going to shrink the size of the screen right here so we have a little bit more working area. And right here, it's going to automatically populate this, this dashboard right here by getting information from the universal data model, which is working on top of our Black Cube technology. So right here, it's just loading the object right here. Sorry if it's a little bit slow. It's on my own local machine right now. But right here, what you'll notice is that whenever it finishes loading, we'll see that we have predefined filters at the top that can be used to filter the report and open them dynamically for us. And right here, we can see we have meaningful KPIs of the net income in 2018 versus 2017. We see we have a return on assets of 101.61%. We have our net income attached to here too for year-to-date current period information. And at the bottom, we have kind of like a rolling 12 of our sales versus our EBITDA margin, EBITDA attached to that right here too. And we have a little tiny income statement attached into this worksheet right here. So to achieve these types of results, what we do is that we created, like I said earlier, a chart of account inside the system. And when we install the application, is we have to map that chart of account to the accounts that we have in the system. Since every company is slightly different, we just have to make sure to map the KPIs that we have so that you guys can have these meaningful reports. So this is one as an example. I can always open, for example, financial performance, which is a completely different dashboard, but they're all being calculated based off of the chart of account that we set up and are all being calculated dynamically. And right now I'm connecting to Sage X3 data, but I could be connecting to 300 at the same time. I could be connecting to 100 or other systems available inside of here. So right here, I'm opening up another one where we see a return on assets with a balance sheet, working capital, return on equity, debt to equity ratio, and then we have inventory, accounts receivable, and cash attached to it. So it's connecting to the data warehouse and creating these meaningful reports that sometimes take a lot of time to calculate, but they're here right away with quick information available to us. And this is all out of the box that you see right here. And it's all as long as you map our chart of account that we made available inside the software. So right here, let's start talking about that chart of accounts setup that we have. So it's a chart of accounts setup that is something that's built inside of a worksheet that has data entry, and it is customizable. So for example, if you want to take our chief financial officer and we look at our income statement, we might want a different breakout than what we have right here. And that's always something we can do with the chart of account setup that we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our finance tab. And inside the finance tab, we have the finance data model process. So right here, it's going to give us access to all of the views like the income statement, trial balance, balance sheet report, cash flow. But we're not going to look at those just yet. And we also have access right here to the configuration. So the configuration is where you can configure that chart of account. You can configure the report builder, the currency conversion. We also have the opening balance. If ever we want to run a simulation of the opening balance, we have it right here. And then we have the accounts payable a bit lower. So we're going to start with the report account mapping, and I'll just open this up really quickly. And right here, you'll notice that I have three chart of accounts inside the system. I could have more if I imported them, but for now, that's all I have. If I open up NA1, what you'll notice is that I already set up this chart of account myself earlier, where I have my list of KPIs that are included whenever I import the template. So the one thing that you have to know about this mapping is that if you want the default KPIs that are out of the box operational, you'll have to map this chart of account with the right accounts. So right here, you can see for assets, I have 1 star. So basically everything that's starts with 1 will retrieve it to say that it belongs to my KPI asset. And then I can go a bit lower and see, for example, my KPI sales is everything that starts with 4. Inside these ranges right here, we can use the star so that if ever someone adds a new account, we can exclude it. We can add, for example, a range of accounts if I want to. So let's say, for example, 4,000 to 5,000. It's all things that I can pre-program in here to make sure that we retrieve all of those accounts inside that range. So if ever someone adds a new account in the future, it's going to get added dynamically. On the right side of this here too, we also have the accounts to be excluded. So if ever we're doing a range and we want to exclude certain accounts, we can do so. So this here, what's important to note is that these KPIs are what assist us in calculating the KPIs inside of the financial performance and every dashboard that we have. So if you want them to work, you have to make sure to map this chart of account. And once these chart of accounts are mapped, you can then create subgroups if you want to, so to separate the accounts differently. And we'll do so a little bit after. But by default, as long as we map this chart of account right here, all of the KPIs inside the Chief Financial Officer, financial performance, and all of the other dashboards that we have, so profit and loss, cash management, will all be functional as long as this is mapped. Perfect. Whenever, so let me just go back to my worksheets right here on the left side. Give me a little second. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so right here, this is where you would map this chart of account. I'm gonna go make changes to this chart of account later to separate the groups a little bit more, but I will do so afterwards. One thing that you'll notice is that whenever I open, for example, the Chief Financial Officer report right here, so while this loads right here, I'll answer a quick question that we have. So inside of here, we do have, inside the Finance UDM, we do have access to the pyramids that we can use to generate reports. But I will show you guys something also later that we could import the report codes of X3 inside of this account mappings to build more reports in the future. So the pyramids are available for you to use. It's inside of the finance data model that I'll show you guys a little bit later. So right here, whenever we build our reports right here, as you'll notice right here is that we have an income statement layout report right here, which is an income statement layout that we built using this tool with using the section called Report Builder. So the Report Builder is used to be able to create reports a little bit like this right here that we weren't able to really be able to create before. And this Report Builder allows us to dynamically create a structure for us to be able to get sales, cost of goods, gross margins, which is basically a combination of sales and cost of goods, to be able to really create something dynamic for us. So inside of the Report Builder is where we can build these blueprints on how to display these reports. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the Report Builder blueprint, and we get automatically a selection page where I can select the report code I want to see. So the report code I want to see, I can select an income statement, I can select the cash flow. So if I click on the little prompt button that we have right here, we have the default balance sheet, the default cash flow 2, and default income statement. But since I want to show you them all, I'm not going to select the filter and just click confirm. So the report blueprint is really there to be able to create custom dynamic reports without having to go into the report designer and make a very complicated report. So right here, if I open a simple report called default income statement, we can see that we have line orders attached to this right here. So sales, cost of goods, gross margin, expenses, and net income. And right here, as you'll see, so the sales is associated to our KPI sales group that we saw earlier inside the account setup. So basically, whenever I use KPI sales, it's going to go into my account setup and retrieve all of the accounts that are listed inside the 4,000 right here, and so on. And whenever we have a calculation between two groups, so for example, KPI sales and for example, gross margin, we're adding our KPI sales and our KPI cost of goods together to be able to achieve a total information right here. So right here, we can see that we're reversing the sign from the top. So anything that is negative will then become positive and so on, so that we can create dynamic calculations. So this one right here is a simple one, but then we can go into something a little bit more complex where we see a default balance sheet. So it's basically a balance sheet report where we see my first level grouping is assets. Then I have a level 2 that I have my current assets. And then I can say cash equals to my account group KPI cash will get the list of accounts of that account setup that we have at the top, and so on. So we're basically building a report tree right here that we can then make displayed into a dashboard and have more meaningful reports given to you. So these are the ones that are there by default. So as long as you map the KPI groups, you'll have these meaningful reports right away. And if I open up my dimensions and measures, what you'll notice also is that right here, I have multiple levels. So I have levels all the way to level 10. So that means I can have 10 levels of drilled down information to go get to that final result. And these here are groups that we create ourselves. So it's not necessarily like a dimension or a measure that we have in the system. And it's there to allow us to really expand and increase the details of a report that are maybe not configured inside of X3 correctly. So these report codes allow us really to make things dynamic for you guys, and then to be able to use them inside of a dashboard because we're using a report tree logic that we've created inside of the universal data model. So with these right here, what I'll do is I'll show a little example on how we can customize it to enhance the experience a little bit. So what I'm just going to do first is I'm just going to go into my finance report, and I'm just going to open up a quick income statement report to show you guys the default layout on how it is. And I'm just going to say I want my chart of account to be NA1, click confirm. And now I have, for example, 2 levels of code. So my level 2 has nothing in it right now. And then I have my list of accounts. So right here, I can do like a little example of taking my sales and maybe separating my sales into 2 separate groups. So if I open up my level 2, I'll notice that I have a list of accounts available to me right here. So I have 41 and 49. So what I can do for that is I can go into my account setup, and I won't be updating my sales right here. I'll keep it as is because it's still being used as a KPI to calculate different things in our environment. We just want to modify that report to enhance the look and feel based off of the needs that we have. So right here, I'm going to keep the notions of KPI as a standard one to say these are the out of the box. And right here, I'm just going to write, basically, I'm going to create new ones. I'm going to say NEC sales 1, which I'm just going to give it a little description to say it's equal to sales 1. And then I'm going to separate it into maybe a NEC sales 2. And right here, I'm just going to come specify, okay, so these accounts right here, let's just say sales 2 right here to keep it standard. I'm going to say, give me everything that starts with 41 star, and the last one was 49 star. So right here, I'm basically separating a little bit my KPI sales section to be able to separate it into 2 different parts. So with this right here, we utilize also info pages to be able to execute this, because once we change this information, it's not 100% live because we might want to we want to make a few changes before publishing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the report account mapping, and I'm going to go into the info page of this data modeler right here. And right here, we have a few things where I can generate a chart of accounts. So let's say, for example, we might have multiple charts of accounts in the system. I can generate it for another one that we have. So let's say, for example, I click this little button right here, and I say I might want to see my Australian chart of account, for example. I can say generate SQL, and then it's going to make that chart of account available to me to start mapping to generate reports after that. This one right here, I'm going to explain it to you guys afterwards, but we're going to come back to this after. Now, since I made changes in the chart of accounts, we'll then use this new block right here that we're going to say, I need to publish a new account grouping. I'm going to use a little prompt, and I'm going to say NA1, and I'm going to say update for SQL Server. So you see Oracle, that means it's compatible also with Oracle at the same time. So now, if I go back into here, my chart of account has been mapped, and it has been published. So now I can use those KPIs inside of my report blueprint to generate new reports. So right here, you'll notice that since I imported a new chart of account, I now have my Australian chart of accounts with a list of all the KPIs that are available to me. And we also create new lines in case you guys want to separate them like we just did. And since these KPIs can belong to multiple chart of accounts, multiple systems, it makes it that it can all interconnect together dynamically. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my report blueprint, and right here, I'll go into my income statement where I have 2 extra lines right here. So there is an info page for this data model too to be able to generate new lines, but I'll utilize these ones right here since they're already there. So right here, you can see that we have a separation of line orders of 1,000. This was done for a very particular reason. It's so that we can add groups between each section, because we use these line orders to be able to decide what the order of the finished report will look like. So that being said, it gives me the possibilities of adding 999 groups between each one of these subsections right here. So it adds us flexibility to be able to enhance it further. So right here I can say I want to create a new group for sales. So I'm going to say 1,100. And I'm going to say this group right here is going to be a second level. So right here I can say sales part 1. And I'm just going to do the same thing right here and say 1,200 and say sales part 2. And then for these two groups, what I want to come do is I want to say for this report right here, I want it to be NEC sales 1 and NEC sales 2. And this here is a data entry form. So I'm entering values and it's going to push that data back to the database to update it dynamically. So whenever it goes green, it means that it's been modified. So I'll just delete this last line because we don't need this here anymore. And it's going to update themselves. When we talk about data entry, there's a few things that we can do. We can make it automatically save whenever we enter values, but this one is not made like that. So I'm just going to go into Save Changes and say Save Data, and it's going to save that data back to the database. And we can also activate right here inside the data entry, activate autosave. All right, so I do have a question of Bob Blanchard. He's asking, can we copy the report blueprint and modify a copy, then rather modifying the default? Of course you can. Let me just verify one little thing right here. So there's not a copy button right here at the moment, but we could add one. But you can always go into the SQL to make a copy of it. Nothing stops you from doing that. And you can also create one from scratch if you wanted to. So we have the copy of the report under another language that we can do. But we don't have an option to copy it, but it's something that can easily be done in the future. But you can always add new lines, create new reports, and publish the report. So let me just go back here. So when I click refresh of this right here, what you'll notice now is that when I look at the default income statement, we have the sales part 1, part 2. So we kind of have like a tree form that's starting to build. I can do the same thing for expenses and so on and build it dynamically. So this information gets displayed to us. Right here, my gross margin is still KPI sales. I could change it to say NEC sales 1 or NEC sales 2, but my KPI sale represents both of these groups right here. So I don't necessarily have to change it at this point because it's a total line, but it's just a question of changes in this information. And once I'm happy with these changes, what I can go do is I can go into the report builder info page that we just had. And what I want to do is I want to publish that report that we just changed. So right here, I'll go into default income statement that we have, click confirm, and I'll publish it for SQL Server. So that makes it that if, whenever I go to my default income statement right now, I have my level 2, my level 1, and if I click refresh, and I open my group 1, I now have that break part of sales part 1, sales part 2, and I can use the properties of the worksheet to remove that 1,000 if I wanted to, and just show the description so that the next level grouping will have those accounts that I listed earlier. So we can really break it up in multiple different subsections to be able to enhance the look and feel of the report to have that drill down value that you like. And since I updated the default income statement right here, what that actually gives me is that since this here uses the default income statement report, what you'll notice is that if I edit this right here and go into the properties of these groups, I can add that level to, let me just hide these questions right here, bring that up, and then I can go into these settings to say, I want to show it. So basically I can come here and say, if I open this group, I'll see that code 1000, 1200. I can say, for this group, I want to only show the description, and this is something you can do on the worksheet too. And I also want to make sure that the sort is based on the code instead of the description. So now when I look at this report, I can open that level of grouping and have that second level where we have our sales part 1, sales part 2, and so on, and do that separation. So it could be something to do with product categories or precise account codes that we want to separate into 2 subgroups for these report blueprints and have them be displayed in the way that we want. So it's a very dynamic way to generate these reports with a tree. And it's easier to do this than to build a complex Excel file where we don't necessarily have report codes. And the main key point of this is that these reports will work as long as you map the chart of account correctly. So it's given to you as long as that chart of account is mapped with all of these KPIs that are sometimes hard to calculate. So now this report is complete where I have this detail. I could save it, and next time I open, I'll have these subgroups attached to it dynamically. Perfect. Inside of here, we also had the report preview that basically just gives us a quick preview. But one thing that's very interesting is that we also have a currency conversion rate maintenance that we can play around with inside of here. So for example, inside of here, if I look at the list that I imported earlier, I have my fiscal year, my period, my currency, and my global currency with the average and closing rate of that month. So with this, we can use these values inside the system, and then we can go update them here dynamically to put the values that we want. So 1.20 something, and then it allows us really to view the report with a different currency based on what we're entering inside of here. So it allows us to have closing rates, average rates, so that they can be used in the future and so on. So I only uploaded 1 year only and just did US to Canadian, but you can have multiple ones inside of here dynamically. So inside of here, one thing that I want to show you guys a little bit more is this is a configuration just for the finance. We also have a general configuration that is available for the UDM, and that is the one that contains the analytical dimensions inside of X3. So a lot of you guys use X3 and the analytical dimensions attached to it. And right here is a location where we can say my analytical dimension 1 is equal to a certain value. My analytical dimension 2 is equal to another one, and so on. So right here, I can see my GL module where I have my division attached. And then if I click on this, I have a little prompt attached to it. So we're using SCI's data entry capabilities to maybe say, for my sales order, my analytical dimension 1 is equal to a certain value, and so on. So we can select them and populate these informations so that my analytical dimension 2 is always equal to EMP or division, and so on. And these here are all built on a data entry form that allows us to write back to the database. It works very well. And then these here make it that whenever I open a financial performance report and I select analytical dimension, it will populate the list based off the values that I have. But right now, there's nothing for that division in my system at the moment. But it makes it that analytical dimension 1 is equal everywhere inside of the application for us. Okay. So after doing this right here, so we can see that with the account setup that we can populate, create new accounts. What we also added for X3 is the capabilities of being able to import X3's reporting code. So inside of X3, you can set up reporting codes to say these accounts equals to sales, these accounts equals to cost of goods. And we kind of want to make them available to end users in the end. So what we can do is I'll go back into the configuration that we were looking at earlier. And right here we have what we call the report account mapping. So I'm just going to go into the info page of this. And what we're going to say is I have a little section right here that's called import SQL server only for the account grouping from the ERP. So I'm going to click this. And when I go into, for example, my report or account setup that I had open earlier, and I click refresh, what you'll notice is that my chart of accounts will have increased substantially because I'm on a demo environment. And then we can see all of the chart of accounts that are available to us. And if I open, for example, NA1, you'll notice is that I have a series set of new account groupings that have been created. So accrual, AP, AR, capital, and these are all configured by X3. And if ever I rerun the scripts, it's going to update it based off of what's inside of X3. So instead of maybe using the KPIs to build a report blueprint, we can use something a little bit differently to make it available to us. So that being said, I can go into the report blueprint right here and say view info page. And right here I can say I want to create a new report. So let's call this NEC-IS. So we're going to create a new NEC-IS report, and I'm going to create it for in English. So I'm going to say create SQL, and it automatically adds me 100 lines that we can play around with. So now if I go into my report blueprint that we had open and I click refresh, you'll notice that I have all of these different, this new report that I created, and now I have blank lines that I can go play around with. So right here, I can create another income statement based off of those accounts that I have or any type of report. And this is where I can come play around with it. So right here, I could say my first level is sales. Then I have my cost of goods as a second level. Then I can say my gross margin. And then I can be playing a little bit with my levels of drill down to add subcategories. But right here, instead of using maybe my configuration that I had for my KPIs that I've pre-established, I'll use the ones that exist for X3. So right here, sales, but I put it on the wrong side. So let me just move it here to make sure that the value is negative. And then cost of goods, it's COGS. And then this here would be equal to sales minus the cost of goods. So I'm combining them both together, and it's going to add a reverse sign to it so that it's going to show us in positive. So now if I save this data right here, save data, I now have a slight report structure that's built really quickly. And now I have these accounts set up for it. So what I have to do is go publish the account that the report builder that I just created, and also the report account structure that I have right here. So I'll just go into the first view info page and generate this new chart of account that I played around with. So let's say NA1, and I'll say update SQL. So it's going to make sure that that list of accounts gets generated. And now I'm going to go into my report blueprint and say view info page, and basically do the exact same thing but publish the report. So it makes it that you can play around with the reports without making them official and not having someone open them between your changes. So right here, NEC-IS, and click confirm. And I'm just going to publish it. And now when I go into my income statement report right here and click refresh, it's going to give us that report code right here. So this is something that's important to note, is that whenever we're building these reports, we're filtering with this report code. So if I remove this filter right here, what you'll notice is that I'll have all of the report sections that we have because we're at level 1. But if I bring in that report code right here as a dimension, you'll notice is that I'll have one report after the other being built. So null is everything, and then I have my default balance sheet, cash flow 2, and my new income statement that's available right here. And now I have my sales, my cost of goods, and my gross margin that's right here. So it's being built dynamically on the fly, and we're using features that we developed inside of the web interface to make sure that some of the groups are not expandable. So for example, if I look at right here, I have my gross margin that I can't expand, and that is done with an option inside of the general section where I can add a group formatting to my grouping information. And when I click on this, you'll notice is that we have some group formatting that blocks us from doing a drill down. So right here we can see when my text is equal to 3,000 or 5,000, it says allow row expansion right here. It's unchecked. So if I check this and click OK, what it's going to do is now my gross margin, I can drill down into that detail, and that detail will contain the information of my sales and my cost of goods inside one subgroup. So we can make sure that they can't drill down into this detail to see all the information attached to it. So right here, I have all of my sales account and my cost of goods accounts dynamically inside this group, but we basically suppress that level of drill down with the group formatting attached to it. Whenever we build these types of reports, it comes with a series set of different measures and so on. So if I look into my dimensions and measures right here, what you'll notice is that I have a lot of different dimensions, all subcategorized into different folders. And I have a lot of different measures right here. So budget posting, accounts payable, net income, operating income, debt, actual year to date, and so on. So there's a lot of different measures inside of here. And to know what we can bring into the report designer or inside this report that we have right here, basically, whenever we use the report codes, we have certain measures that are utilized for the report codes in question. So those fields right here, so right here we can see net income statement, we have values showing up here. What we do is that when we build a series set of different measures that allow us to say, for example, report, if I just search for report, you'll notice that I have a preset of all of the different report measures that we can use. So everything that starts with report will use the structure of the report codes to calculate itself to do that negative value and everything. So right here I can say, I can bring in my report posting last year, and right here I can maybe say bring in my variance to this report so I can have that variance. So there's a bunch of predefined calculations that are here to guide us in creating these reports, and we can also create more of them. But these measures right here are there to calculate based off of the report structure. And if I search, for example, for sales, I have sales rolling sales. These are all measures that are calculated dynamically with our KPI groups that we've established. So if I bring this right here, it's going to be equal to, if I open up the group, right now it gives me nothing because I have that report code set up right here. But if I remove this, you'll notice is that whenever I'm not using the report code, I'm going to have values inside of here displayed for me dynamically. So since this NecIS is using something different, which is my sales from X3, it's not populating this information. So that's kind of why it shows 0 right here, and versus these ones right here where we have a little bit more information. So it's just important to note with these reports to use the measures with the report abbreviation before, so that we can use a bunch of these fields inside of here. So you can create something very complete and custom. And as you can see right here, with the group formatting and the column formatting, we're able to say whenever we're at, for example, the gross margin level, use some lines to separate it to make it more powerful, and maybe add some bold to it if we wanted to. So all these together work as a team to be able to generate these meaningful reports without having to build a big report designer inside the report designer section, which you still can, or having to do it through Excel. So it's our way to really make these meaningful reports be shown inside the web, and then bring these inside a meaningful dashboard afterwards. Perfect. Okay, so now that we saw how the report code structure is done, you can build any type of layout report that you want, and you basically just use the report code as a filter so that you can really see the detail of that report and really build a unique custom structure for any modification that you want to do in the future. The report blueprint is something that was available in 8, but was really enhanced in the late version 8 and early 9 to really make it a lot easier to add these levels of groupings dynamically to be able to create these custom reports with the least amount of effort to be able to achieve these results. So that is a little bit about the report builder, currency conversion, a little bit of all those things right there. On top of that right there, what we also give with the financial section is something that is very powerful. So inside of here, we have, if I just close up some of these subgroups right here, just give it a second, just a slight delay on the screen. So with the Finance Universal AML, we also have access to accounts payable and accounts receivable. So these two folders right here will be able to give us meaningful information for us to use. So we have an accounts payable historical and accounts receivable historical right here. So it allows us to see what our aging of our customers are based on a given date inside the system. So it's going to calculate itself dynamically. So right here I have 2020, 06, 04, but I know that I'm working with very, very old data right now. So if I just switch this right here for 2018, what it's going to do, it's going to give us my aging report based off of this given date. So when I click confirm, it's going to give me this information dynamically. And it's being used with the cubes that we built for the UDM. And it's going to load the information where I can come see what the system looked like at that given time inside the system. So right here, I can see the chosen date on top. I have my transaction currency. And inside of here, I can drill down to see my company ID, site ID, vendor, and so on. And then that document, and all the way to my overdue amount in my this currency right here. So if I drill down into USD, for example, I can see what the different companies are inside of here. So we have NA10, FR10, and so on. So we can really see at that given time the look of that customer and really play around with it dynamically. So this is a report that can sometimes take a lot of time to generate, but it's just a simple click and we get that result to you very quickly. And since it's built on a data warehouse, an OLAP cube, the access to that information is very fast and very, very precise. So it's very quick, it's already pre-calculated, and it gets you the information that you need to make meaningful decisions very quickly. When we look at this report right here, it's very similar to the accounts receivable that we have underneath here. And the accounts receivable is the exact same thing where we can open this report right here and have it be made available to maybe, I'll change the date this time right here to be 2017. And I'm going to say month 12 and 01. And at the bottom is the date format that we're sending as a parameter out. So we can see exactly what it looks like. And same type of reports. And it's just going to load this information for us dynamically. So now this information is loaded right here. So we have very similar where we have the overdue amount from the receivable department. And it allows us to really pinpoint at a given time if we had issues with certain customers and so on to see maybe a trend to see how they evolved over a given time. So right here, I can go all the way to the document level to see that detail. So I'm just going to open this up to the final level of grouping to see all that good information. So adjusted document date, number of document, and so on. And right here, the next level should be this is my customer ID, I believe. And then if I open this right here, I'm almost at that final level of grouping, just like we would have on a normal worksheet view and so on. And then you have that adjusted document number, and I can go into the details to see when that date was and so on. So we have all this meaningful information for us to analyze and play around with. So right here, adjusted document, we can see it's 0801, and the due date of that document is there too, so that we can really see how everything is calculated. So right here, I also have accounts receivable by period. And right here, I have fiscal year, fiscal period, and I'll just click change that. So I updated the fiscal, the year to be 2018 by default. I'll just click confirm. And right now, this information gets displayed to us with the fiscal period, sales representative, customer ID, document number, and so on. And right here, I can see that date, exact month on how that was at that given time. We had the same thing for the accounts payable at the top. So it's just a different way to look at that exact information for a given month in question. Okay, perfect. Does anyone have any questions related to the financial UDM? Just want to make sure that if anyone has any questions, that we can cover them right away. And while I'm waiting just for a few seconds for questions, let me just quit this right here. Sorry about that. There we go. Just so we don't get another notification. So does anyone else have any other questions? I see there's only 2 that we already answered. We'll just wait an extra minute to see if there's additional questions. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me just play this right here. Okay. Okay, so after building the finance data model, we started to attack different venues. So we're going to be building more and more data models to connect to more different data points, not just sales, not just finance, but we're going to be doing Okay, so I'm just connecting and we'll go over the different sales things that we've attached to the template, the universal data model. Do you guys still hear me? Okay, perfect. Sorry about losing the sound just a second. Sorry about that. So let's talk about the sales universal data model, where whenever we open the sales folder, we have a bunch of different different data models that are made available to us. So we have the sales details, sales invoice analysis, sales order analysis, and we also have a new forecasting module that is made available to us to really work around with. So what I'll do is I'll just open up the sales details first. So right here, it's a combination of invoices, orders, deliveries, returns, and so on. So when I open, for example, my invoices, we have a pretty generic layout of a report where we have the calendar year, calendar period, local currency, customer ID, invoice number, and then we have meaningful information attached to that too. So we have our quantity, our amount ledger, our amount local, which could be different based off of what system we're connecting to, and so on. So right here, if we look at the dimensions and measures, we have a few dimensions that are made available to us, where we have our different analytical dimensions that are here. We have our currency, customer information, where we can say customer type, customer stats group 1, and so on. We have our shipping information, our invoice, order, product, so a bunch of product stats groups coming from the different systems. And then we have a series of pre-built measures that are made available to us. So for example, invoice amount, local amount, invoice quantity, return, shipping. They're all in here that we can just bring into the report and visualize them a little bit more details. This is for the sales details, where we can see a combination of everything. And we also have basically a sales invoice analysis, where we have a little bit more detailed information of all of this nice layout and look and feel. So for example, right here, I have my product stats groups that are made available, invoice amount with the month-to-month growth. So there's a lot of different pre-built measures that we can use right here. And basically it shows you the quarter-to-quarter growth if you're filtering with a value and so on, year-to-year growth, year-to-year, year-to-date and stuff like that. They're all pre-calculated measures that are attached inside here that really allow us to give more meaningful information to the customer. So invoice cost last month and so on. So whenever you filter the information, it gives you these meaningful KPIs available to you. So I can easily, for example, bring in my invoice quantity inside my report, and now I have that information right here. So it's really combining the information of also, it's not just getting information from X3. If I'd had other systems connected, we would be connecting all of the systems into one and be able to report off of that solution all at once. So we also have the same thing for sales order analysis. So basically what we're ordering and what we're invoicing with a little bit more detail versus the sales details. But the same concept where we have basically customer lifetime values, average customer values, average per order, customer average lifespan, and we have a lot more meaningful KPIs that are made available to us with the UDN sales, and it basically reads off that information. So we have, for example, we have some new analysis to say what are our new customers, last year customer count, returning customers. So there's a lot of added KPI indicators that we've attached to these UDMs to be able to really make the reports speak out a bit more. So basically order frequency are things that we have also in here, right here. So if I look, for example, and search for frequency, by year average order frequency. So basically you can see how many times this customer can order and so on. And they're all things that are calculated with these indicators that we've created inside the sales. Perfect. All right. I won't go super in detail of everything related to the sales because I want to take a little bit more time to discuss with you guys the forecasting that we've added to Nectari. So for example, right here, we have, at the bottom right here, we have a few sections. So we have sales forecast month, quarter, fiscal month, quarter, and so on, and calendar week forecast. But these are all data models that will connect to our new forecasting tables that we have now available. So these here get driven by what we have into the forecast data entry section that we have available right here. So as most of you are aware, with Nectari, we can easily do data entry on a budget that we already have a template pre-built inside the application to enter your own budget information. Even if we're coming from X3 300, we all have a base budget data model available to us to do budget entry. But one thing that wasn't necessarily inside the system is the forecasting. So being able to forecast on sales and so on. It's not something that was necessarily natively inside of Nectari. And also for X3, it's an on-demand forecast. So it's not necessarily like a phone load forecasting tool. You can still do a lot with it. But what we decided to do is develop a little bit of a forecasting kind of tool inside the application. So for example, forecast data entry is here. And the first thing that we have to do whenever we want to forecast inside of Nectari is to be able to decide what we want to forecast. So what is the configuration that we want to forecast on? So whenever I open this right here, you'll see that I already have two forecasts set up where I have a default one and a training that I did in French a little while back. So I'm going to go into the info page right here, and I'm going to create a new setting. So let me just say, for example, webinar. Perfect. And I'm just going to create. And now I created myself a new reporting or a new forecasting structure that I can manipulate and use. So right here, if I open up webinar right here, you'll notice is that I have a few source aliases And I'm just going to remove and put it into the columns. And right here, I'm going to be able to show you guys how this kind of works right here. So this here is basically a quick tool to tell us what do we want to forecast on. So right here we can see that we have some no's, we have some yes attached to it. So we can see, okay, what do we have as yes? So let me just say I want to see based on as this right here as my second level grouping, so that when I look at, for example, my webinar, I can see what am I forecasting on. So country, state, city, company, sales rep, customer, product. And maybe I want to maybe add something a bit extra. Let me just go see right here. Maybe I want to say site. Okay, site could be something good. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to bring this back down so I can update that value dynamically. And I'm going to say, I also want to forecast on that site. Right here, we also have different things like customer user defined fields, analytical dimensions that we can map like we showed a little bit earlier. But right here, I'm just going to go to my site and say, I want to forecast on my site also. So this is basically just the kind of like the mapping table for us to make sure that we select the proper fields to forecast inside of our tool. So right here, after setting up the dimensions that we want to forecast, it's always best to limit the list, because the more you go into detail, the more that whoever is forecasting will have to enter it at a more granular level. So right here, we have it by quarter, we have it by month, and we have it by week also. So inside each one of these folders, it represents how do we want to forecast this information inside the system. Do we want to do it by quarter, month, week? We have those capabilities. And inside of each one of these folders, what we have is the capabilities of saying forecast in work, so what's currently in process. And we also have a validation process that we've added on top of this right here. So that means that we have a few steps to do to make sure that that forecast is finally validated at the end. So it's not just a enter the values and have it sent out and everything's okay. There is a validation process that we set up inside of here to make sure that everything is perfect. So that being said, I'm satisfied with the configuration I did. And I'm just gonna create a forecast by month right here. So I'm gonna go into my forecast, and if I open what's in work, I can see forecast name. I can probably select the value inside of here, but I'm just gonna click confirm. And right here, technically, I shouldn't have a forecast that's in the work right now because I didn't create it yet. So it's completely empty. I do have some forecasts that are published at the bottom, but right now there's nothing actually in the work for that month. So now let's start a new task. We'll go into the forecast in work, and I'll go into the info page right here, where it will tell me what do I want to do. Do I want to generate a new forecast? Do I want to send for an evaluation? Do I want to add new lines, and so on? So what I want to start by doing is I want to generate that forecast template that I have. So I'm going to go into the configuration ID, where I have my default, my training French, and my webinar right here. And I'm going to select and click confirm. And then I can add it a name. So let's say, for example, Nectari as the name, and 1 to say it's my revision number 1. The next step is really identifying what do I want to create. Do I want to create a forecast by fiscal calendar or the standard calendar? So we're going to say calendar right here. Then I have the option to either say, do I want it to forecast off amount or by quantity inside the system right here. So right here, I can easily specify amount, and then it's going to generate me a forecast by that amount value inside the system. And then the next step is, what year do I want to forecast on? So let's say, for example, I have data inside the system of 2018. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to start the forecast saying my first period of my forecast will be period 3, just so I have data previously and I have data for the future, so that I can really show the meaningful information. Of course, on a regular basis, it would be showing doing the forecast for the future. But right now, since I have legacy data inside the system, I find it good to go back a little bit. Then the second option right here is to say, do I want to increase the value based off of last year? So let's say, for example, we're doing a forecast and we want to automatically say, give me a 1% increase on all of the values of last year. This is a place where you can automatically create that increase right here. So I'm just going to say 2% increase, and I'm going to generate that SQL statement. And what that's going to do is it's now going to make me have a forecast available to me. Let me just hide this right here. And when I click refresh, I now have that forecasted template available to me. So now I have 539 records of details based off of that selection that I did. And right here, I can open up this forecast to say, my username is admin, so we're flagging the user that's connecting right now. The forecast name is Nectari, like I had it earlier, and my revision number is 1. So now I can drill down into this detail and see a list of all the customers that I have with their product ID and so on. So right here, I can see my starting period is 3, and then I can see this is my period 3, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these values here are being generated by what I actually did the previous 12 months before. So it's automatically putting that value so that you have a base starting point, a little bit like what we have with the budget entry process, but really allows us to really navigate through this information and make it a little bit smoother. So now we can go update these values dynamically if we wanted to. So right here, we know that we forecasted by site, by city. So let's say, for example, I go into my dimensions and I say, bring in my city so I can maybe make changes based off of the city. So right here, I'll just click on dimensions and measures and search for customer or geography and say build to city. And I'll bring it in right after my username. I can also bring in the sales rep details and so on to make that available. And we can also play with the security here to make sure that a sales rep can only see his data. So right here, we can see build to city. We have a bunch of cities available, so Chicago, so on. And let me just move this past of the revision number so that it's a bit smoother and looks a little bit better. Just because it was expanding everything since it was saved with an auto expand attached to this worksheet. So right here, you'll notice that we have the revision number right here where I can open up and see the different build to states that we're looking at. And let's say, for example, we know that certain regions are going to have an increase in sales because of, let's say, for example, we have a water sport, for example, product. And we know that it's going to be a warm summer based off of what happened last year. So we can say, okay, for Frankfurt, or let's say, for example, Madrid, for example, in period 1, we had 26,000, but that is the forecast value. And I can always say this year, I think it's going to be a little bit more. So maybe 30,000, and it's going to do a split by ratio based off of what was done last year to achieve that value. So if I drill down into the details of this right here, it's going to put it into the product technology. And if ever there's a different breakdown, it would have increased that based off what we did last year dynamically. Now I can always go increase the value of the ones that were at 0, but I have to go at the detail level line fat. And I can always go make changes inside of here. So let's say, for example, 51,000, and it's going to update those values dynamically for this forecast right here. And it's going to do data entry on a table that we have set up. So basically, this is the area where your sales rep can come enter their values inside of here. And I can easily bring in, for example, the sales rep ID with their name attached to it so that we can forecast on that information right there. So it gives them to see their numbers, to populate their numbers inside this right here. And then whenever they're done, they can then send it off to be validated in the end. So right here, I have 2018, and if I open up that revision number 1, I have a list of all of my sales rep inside the system, and each user that connects can be associated to one of these IDs and only see their information attached to this worksheet based off of the restrictions that we're building. So they can go into their customer list, apply the restrictions attached to it, apply their increase on what they think, and whenever they're actually complete building this information right here, what they can go do is whenever you're done setting up these forecasts right here, so I'm just gonna go in here and make a few changes. So right here, I'm gonna say instead of 6 million, let's say 50, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and click increase. So it's gonna go at every level of grouping underneath where they had a value, and it's gonna automatically increase that dynamically for us. So now we have that forecast period where we have a big amount, and at least we can see it inside the report afterwards whenever we finalize everything to make that available to us. So now that we're okay saying, let's get this forecast validated, what we can do is we can right click, for example, forecast in work, and go into that view info page. So the view info page is really there to execute dynamic scripts to make things work. And right here, I have send for evaluation. So right here, I can say, what forecast am I currently working on? The Nectari one. I know that it's revision number 1, so I'll just place that information right there. And then I can say send for evaluation. So it's going to send that report, so it's going to flag it so that it's no longer available inside of this worksheet right here. So right now, it becomes that it's no longer available in this data model because it's sent out to be validated. So it's completely empty and they cannot make adjustments to it anymore. It basically just added a flag for that the user that's in charge of validating the forecast will now have access to it inside of the forecast to be validated by month. And now when I click this right here, it's going to give me an info page to say what forecast or selection page. It's going to give me what forecast do I want to see, what revision. And right here, I'll just go select the one that we have. And right here, I can say, for example, Nectari, and you saw that whenever I had it open, it showed the different forecast statuses that we had. So validated, to be validated, and so on. And let me just select Nectari here and click confirm. And now it's going to bring me to the screen where I can start validating the forecast and looking at the numbers that are here. So right here we have that year, that period, and we see we have that big increase of 50 million, which seems a bit odd because everything has decimals next to it. So we can maybe go flag that and so on. But we can also make here our own custom changes to it. So let's say, for example, I really don't think this person is going to do that amount, and just basically add a value and it's going to do that increase for us. This right here is set up in a way that there's a workflow attached to it so that you can do the forecast, and at any time I could have went into my view info page and say reject, delete, and so on. So I could have been like, I don't like the work that was done. So what I'll do is I'll go into the Nectari one, revision 1, and say reject. So it makes it that it's no longer available for us to forecast on, or no longer for us to validate, but it's now back into the work in progress. So now when I reload this information right here, what you'll notice is that that forecast now becomes back into the screen right here, where I can see that I have admin Nectari and the changes that I applied for that period 5 are still active. And now that person can go redo some adjustments to it inside the screen. So I'll go back here and put, for example, 20 million, because I'm really comfortable with the number that I had. And I'll just put 20 million right here. And it's going to update that directly. And I'm just going to go back into my forecast in the work and send that to be basically published. So right here, I'll go back into the info page and say, I want to send that back. So I know the name now by heart is Nectari. and I'll just put 1 right here, and I'll send it back to be evaluated in the end. So now when I click refresh, it's now gone, like we had it just a bit previously. And now when I go into the forecast to be validated, it's not going to be back available inside of here. So as we can see, there's a slight workflow that goes from in forecast in work to be validated. What can be done with this right here is utilize the scheduler at the same time, so that if ever there's records to be validated, to send a report out or a notification through the scheduler to say, run every hour, and if there's something to be validated, he will get notified by a distribution that can maybe point him to this report right here. So we can utilize the scheduler mixed with these conditions to really make it that there is a built-in workflow that people get notified whenever there's a new forecast available, and so on, to really create a real forecasting workflow built in. Of course, it's not a full-blown forecasting tool, but it's a great point to get started and enhance your experience with Nectari. So right here, I'm back into the forecast to be validated. He said 20 million. I'm like, I'll accept it, but I'll just lower it just a little bit at the same time, and click enter right here. So I put it to 19 million right here. And now I have this forecast that's now available, and it's basically ready to be validated or rejected or deleted. So I'm going to go into the view info page right here. And this info page right here is basically reject, accept, or delete like we saw before. So I'm going to select my Nectari one, revision 1. And right here, I'm going to say accepted, or I can delete it completely, but I don't want to do that right now. And I'll click accept. So now when I refresh this information, it's no longer going to be available for in the section to be evaluated, but it's going to be available inside the view to show that every forecast that has been validated inside the system. So right here, if I click confirm, I'll have access to this report. And now I have that starting period, all that information. And right here, I have every forecast that have been validated inside the system that I can then use to generate reports with, a little bit like what we have inside of the budget entry and so on, where we can have multiple versions of that iteration to play around with. So now I have that validated forecast that is now accessible to me to load my cube and play around with it. So right here, there's a few things that I can talk a little bit more before showing you the end result of these reports. It's really inside the sales section. We have, for example, let me just check if it's right here. Whenever we go into the forecast data entry and inside the configuration, if I go into the forecast configuration info page, you notice that there's a section that I didn't show you guys earlier. So right here, we have create new settings, which is perfectly fine. But at the bottom right here, we have something a little bit different. So let's say, for example, there's a field that you're missing inside your sales that you want to forecast on. This is where you can come add it dynamically. So there's kind of like a step-by-step guide to show you guys how to do it. So first thing is create the new field where you will import the new field in work and validate the table. So basically right here, I can call it, let's say, for example, color. So we have a field called color. So we'll add it. We'll add the field dynamically. And then map the column cubes that you want to map to the new columns on the forecast table. So you map it to say this field equals to that. So destination column on the forecast table. And right here, it's going to be a list of certain types that you can play around with inside of here. So here, there's some already created, but basically it's a way for us to be able to dynamically add new fields. So you have the step 1 and 2, then you can say add SQL. And then it says follow step 3 to 5 manually. So this is where you have to go into the OLAP manager, add these dimensions, these slices and stuff like that into it. and then you'll have to update the data model afterwards to be able to have access to it. But we did make it in a way that you can create them dynamically so that they show up in that table for you afterwards. Okay, so I have a little quick question of Bob Blanchard. Asking about the revision numbers. So for the revision numbers, there's a few ways that we can work with it. So for example, if I go into the forecasting process, right here we have, we can add extra lines, but for the revision, basically you can create a new version of it. Let me just look at one little section right here. Right there, and let me go see to the validation. If you want to create another revision, you'd have to recreate it, but I believe it's in the works to add something to make copies of it for the future. So right now it's just a question of recreating it, but eventually we might add the capabilities of adding a copy to it so that we can copy an existing revision or an existing number to have it available to reuse afterwards to make copy 1, copy 2, copy 3 based off of changes that people are doing. Let me just see one little thing really quickly. If I go forecast in works, view info page, and send to evaluation, and basically, yeah, so right here, you would recreate it, but there's not really a place for us to copy at the moment, but it might be something that we're gonna add in the future. But for kind of like what we have for the budget process, but you will eventually be able, and it's not really necessarily a long script to do. So it's something that you can maybe just add into an info page to say copy to version 2, for example. So copy forecast 1 into forecast 2, and so on. And eventually we might also add features inside of here to say copy starting from month 5 to, and so on, and add me extra lines afterwards. So it's always something that we're constantly evolving to make better and better, but it's a great starting point to get working. And there's always the place for you guys to play around with it even more to add even more functionalities. It's not written in stone that this is how you have to use it, but it's a great starting point for you guys to start forecasting and then maybe add some features and enhancement to it in the future based off of your usage of it and how you might want to get it to work instead. So as you can see right here, I have multiple forecasts already here, and they're all starting with different base starting points. So you can always create one for every month and so on. But there's multiple ways of using this, and the more and more you will use it, you'll find different tricks of getting this done. And yeah, but great question. Keep them coming. So now that we have the forecast set up, we've validated it. There's one little step that needs to be done. So this step here could be done with an automatic job that gets run, where basically every 20, 10, 15 minutes, you can do a refresh of this information. So right here, if I go into forecast right here, I have my UDM forecast that's available right here. And all I have to do is move this bar first because I lose my objects right now. Give me one little second. There we go. Too many control panels on the right side. And right here, I'm just going to specify to either load all or refresh this cube right here. Just going to do load all, so that my forecast table now gets populated with the new records that we just built. Just bring these questions up again. And now, if I go back to my web view, I now pushed my forecast values inside of my forecast cube so that I can now report off of those values in question. So if I go into, for example, my dashboards, inside the universal data model, we have the sales, we have the accounts payable to and accounts receivable. So we do have those dashboards and questions built on the accounts receivable that we saw earlier. But if we go into the sales, we have summarize, top performers, customer orders, performance analysis. So I'll pick one that doesn't have a forecast attached to it because I didn't show it to you guys earlier. And when we open this report right here, what you'll notice is that we have the calendar year, calendar period, where we have a few KPI indicators right here. So we have sales on 2018 based on what we did this year versus last year inside of here. We have our invoice amounts, and we see like the progression of it over the given time, our invoice by quantity, how increased, and so on. Right here we have our empty invoices, 20, 30 amounts, so by sales, product stats groups. We can see the states that are using the vector maps, that are using the state codes and province codes to generate this list right here. And we can hover over to see that invoice amount. And then we see these meaningful KPIs, and then we can open up, for example, the top performer one right here, where we have all of these meaningful informations available to us. So invoice by month, and these are all working as soon as you import the template. There's not necessarily a chart of accounts set up to do this. There's just maybe the analytical dimension that you have to set up to make sure that they're available. But right here, you have your invoice amount by month. So you can see 2017 versus 18, 19, and 20. So you see 20 is completely empty and 21 too. You have your sales growth per quarter. So you can see that drop. So if I just change this right here to maybe be month 3, just to update this information, you'll see that this stays the same because it's just the quarters that we see. It's going to change if I change it to 2017, for example. This information will change and the numbers will be different because it's looking at the year basis. So we can see that there's an increase of growth at this point right here. Then we see our top sales. There's a word cloud right here, which you can replace for any object. It's still nice to see our top customers. Our top products, so children, standard mountain bike is the top product in this certain category, and so on. So there's a bunch of key indicators mixed with this information to be able to generate these reports in a dynamic way. All of this here also can also be used inside of our new forecast section right here. So we have the calendar one, fiscal year one, and then we have some meaningful dashboards that connect to the forecast data to make meaningful reports. So for example, I'll open, since I was doing it by month, so we have 2 different dashboards that are there, one for quantity and one for amount. And I never remember which one is for amount and which one is for quantity, so I'll open both. But they both house meaningful information to show how you're doing based off of what you did last year, what you did off the forecast. And it's also there for projection too. So to project based on my forecast, how much should I be making for the rest of the year, and so on. So right here, here's one of the quick reports where we can say the actual amount, what we forecasted, actual cumulative amount, forecasted, actual forecast index, but that's looking for the trading May one. I'm going to change this here for the one that we were just created, which is Nectari. And now it's going to load up the information based off of the cutoff period that I have set up right here, which is 6. And then we can see it cuts off at period 6 to see what my actual forecast amount is versus what my actual amount is right here, and so on. So it mix and matches a bit of everything. And if I go into my other dashboard that I have right here, where it's another similar report where I can select the forecast that I'm looking at, and right here in Nectari, and right here, what you'll notice is that I have my cutoff period. That's right here, and that's based off of the forecast that I'm working with. So for example, this one that I just created, I made it start at 2018, month 3. Basically, it progresses itself dynamically. So right here, we can see what my actual sales amount is plus my forecasted amount. So we can see what we're hitting and what we're not. So right here, we can see that I forecasted a large amount for right here, and that might be my 20 million that I put, or 19 million that I put afterwards. So expected sales, and then we have a bunch of meaningful KPIs inside of here with the actual forecast index. And right here, we have this graph right here that uses this cutoff period to show what the actual sales are. So cumulative actual sales. So right here we see my sales are increasing, and then I have my cutoff period, and then you have the forecasted value that replace to say if the forecast matches what we sold, this is where we're going to reach to. So if I change this month right here to be cutoff period of maybe month 8, you can see that that forecast value increases, and then we can see that projection of where we're planning that forecast to be. So it's a very intuitive report, and this uses a combination chart that allows us to have multiple accesses and multiple different series under different types to make it work together into one nice looking view that we have right here. So this alone right here has a lot of meaningful information. And the cutoff period right here is month 8 when we started at 3. So it's showing you based off of the calendar period. And if I put, for example, month 12 and click confirm, you'll see that it's going to cut off right here, and it's going to show the progression of keep continuing and so on. And you see monthly forecast is right here. It now becomes orange when the rest is the monthly amount. So you see really that information driving into this report based off of what we forecasted inside the system and so on. So it's a great place to go get all the information of a forecast. And it's something that we don't always tend to build as a forecast, because all of the work, sorry about that, all of the work that it takes to build this information, but it's already all here available inside of this data model so that we can expand off of it and build a forecast where we can really see the progression. Did we forecast correctly? Did COVID really, how did COVID affect our data inside the system and so on? Because I'm pretty sure all of, except maybe Zoom, increased a lot, but a lot of sales kind of diminished in the last year. And this would be a good way to see this type of information in these curves and everything going on inside the system. So right here, this is a dashboard created off of the calendar month that we had inside the system. It could also have been done on the fiscal year, fiscal period, and so on. So it all depends on how you want this information to be generated so that we can create a meaningful forecast inside the system. And it gives us all this nice data that we can analyze a lot quicker because it's inside of a nice little dashboard right here. And this could also be a dashboard that we then integrate inside of X3 as a landing page so that they don't necessarily have to go into Nectari to visualize this information in the end. So that's always the key, to always try to integrate all systems into one, and integrating inside of X3 really brings Nectari and X3 and shows them really as a full-blown team as they are. And it's something we're also working on to integrate also into 300 Cloud also at the moment, so that we can really bring them both together into one centralized location. All right. That being said, does anyone have any questions related to forecasting? Do you have any particular needs that you'd like me to look at to try to explain to you guys a little bit more in details? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm just gonna wait just a few seconds to see if someone will have any additional questions. Feel free to ask anything about anything that we saw previously too, or if you have any other unrelated questions that you guys want to ask really quickly, feel free. I should be able to answer anything that you guys throw at me. I'll just wait an extra 30 seconds. Let me just see right here. Okay. Okay, perfect. Let me just see these questions right here. Can you forecast multiple measures, i.e. quantity versus price versus cost? For the moment, it's just one measure at a time. But if it's something that you require to have multiple things like that, it's definitely something that we can probably enhance in the future. But for the moment, it's either quantity or measures one at a time. That's perfect. A very good question. I'll write that in as a note afterwards so that we can look at to more in details. And then we have a question about, do we have anything in inventory? I will be covering inventory very shortly, right after this right here. So don't worry about that, I'll look into it. Okay, so I do have a question from Dennis right here. How is the location on the map is used? Is it long and lat, or it takes city and FSA, for example? So how the vector map works, it uses the state codes and country codes using the ISO standards, so the 2-digit information. But we also have a map that uses the longitude and latitude inside the system. That being said, the longitude latitude need to be imported into the system. But once that's done, we can easily embed that into a view type. So inside that view right here, if I go into edit, I can always customize this here really quickly to say view type and change it into, just give it a little second to load up because I have a lot of objects available. So right here, if I select the map right here, this is the map that will utilize the longitude latitude to do pinpoints onto the map, which I don't have on my system right now. Very good question. So based on which one you're using, it's going to use the country code or the province/state code of those countries. Perfect. Okay, let me go into, since we only have, I think, another 10 minutes, I want to take the time to discuss the inventory with you guys, because it's a template that we have for the universal data model that's available to us. And if I close my accounts receivable, sales, calendar, and so on, inside of here, we have, inside the data model view, sorry, wrong folder. So if I close some of these folders right here, you'll notice at the bottom that I have inventory attached inside of here. So let me just, hopefully it's gonna respond. It's working hard right now. So right here, if I open inventory right here, it's gonna, so for the inventory, it is a universal data model that we have, so it can connect to, like before, all of the different systems that we've mentioned in the first original slide. And right here, it's basically a data model that connects in time to any location, any pinpoint in time, to give you what the value of our stock was inside the system at a given time. So for example, if I open historical stock movement and click stock valuation, this will give us the information of what's inside the system, what is our stock valuation, and so on. So I do have these years at the beginning that have no data, which is okay. And if I go a little bit further into 2017, 2018, and so on, you see that I have a beginning balance. So for the inventory data model, we do have a beginning balance, opening balance that we have to run to calculate it. But right here, we can really see, for example, for month 2 of 2017, what my beginning stock value was, what was the net change of that given month, and what is the ending balance after that month has been completed. So right here, we have multiple different dimensions available to us, and it really shows us what the movement of the inventory is month by month to see how things are going. So right here, I have the warehouse ID, and if I open up that warehouse ID, I'll also have that product code attached to it to give us the detailed information of that change of the stock. So right here, I can see that my beginning balance was, we have that beginning balance of 58.62 and 113 right here. And then you can see the detail of that ending balance afterwards inside of here. And let me just play around with this right here. If I go into the dimensions and measures inside of here, we also have different types of dimensions. So we have calendar year, period, period ID. We have the product unit of measure ID, and then the organizational units right here where we have that ledger currency and so on to get that detailed information available to us. So this information right here will allow us really to dive deep into that information. Right here we have the calendar period ID, which is basically a combination of the year and the period attached to it. But we don't necessarily, I know there's a question right here on the screen right now that says, can we have it on a daily basis? For the moment, it's on a monthly basis, but it's always something that we can configure to be on a daily basis. It's just that if we do it on the daily basis, the size of this table will be a lot bigger, of course. So we limited it to a month, but it's always something that we can always take into account to add that level of detail. But just note that it will be a very, very large cube in the end because we do calculate a lot of information inside of here. And this is data that a lot of customers, partners are requesting to have visibility on. And it is an easy, we developed this to be able to get to those questions. And we can always go more granular, but going more granular requires more processing, more space and so on. So we limited ourselves at the moment for this level of detail, but we can always go even further if needed based off of different requirements that we have. But for now, this is what's there right now. And we can see the stock value right here afterwards. So we have the quantity and then we have the value of that stock as a monetary standpoint of view. So we can really see the value of our stock increasing, decreasing over the time. And let's be honest, the best is to have the least amount of value as the ending balance every month because we want that rolling stock to be in and out without having any dormant stock. So it's a good way to really look at month by month to see what's going on, to maybe try to identify key points where why did we have so much stock inside the inventory? And how come we had this amount of value? Was it because we were planning for an order? Was it because we're just trying to be safe because we're expecting something to happen and so on? Like why did we have a 30 million N95 mask, for example, inside the inventory? Well, it's for a good cause at the moment, and so on. So right here, inside of here, we also have multiple different dimensions and measures where we have stock, where we have on hand, ending stock, value changes. So for example, I can see what's on hand at the end of the month instead of stock because it might be allocated to something. We can also see what's transfer in, out, and net. Quality control, so what's been rejected. So if I bring in rejected ending balance, I can see what's being rejected in the system at the moment and why so. Let me just see if there's anything in there. There might not be anything up. So there is quantities that are being rejected. So you can also analyze that information right there. Quality control, there's some miscellaneous measures, so some adjustments. So what's on our sales order, what's on our past request, and so on. So there's a lot of meaningful KPI indicators available for us to have at our disposal to create meaningful information. We also have purchase information, so what's been purchased and so on, what's on purchase, and just giving us as much information as we can to see really the evolution of all the inventory going left and right and seeing where we might have made a mistake on ordering too many things or and so on, and really learn from our mistakes and experience to try to make as much meaningful decisions and impactful decisions too. And right here we also have the information on what's on a work order at the moment and so on, so that we can really see the evolution of everything going on. So we have the beginning, ending of every month to see, okay, so there's so much information inside of just this data model that is interesting to go get. It's of course not as granular as we might want, but it's still a very good base point to get all the information that we need month to month over, just to see the evolution of everything. I would go to week before I would go to days, like someone mentioned before, on a weekly basis, but it's always something that we can adapt to fit your needs afterwards. But it's it's a starting point. It's going to get you guys started looking at the stock movements and everything, because it's a very expensive report to be run on a regular basis, and it's going to really enhance your decision makings in the end. We also have this one right here. I don't know if it's available in the latest one, but I believe it's been removed. But this one here uses the notion of first in, first out to calculate the cost and the inventory value inside the system. So inside of here, we have one thing right here, the opening balance. So this here, to be performant in the way it is, we had to create kind of like what we did for the GL, to be able to create that opening balance so that we can do that rolling information dynamically for us and make it functional. So the prerequisite to really have this up and running is really to run the inventory opening balance in a dynamic way right here. Let's see one thing right here. Okay, perfect. And it's really a very powerful data model right here that's included with the UDM. So the very fun thing about this is that it connects multiple systems together. So it's not just looking your X3. It could be looking at your 300 and X3 combined into one. So there's a lot of added benefit of using these universal data model templates. And they're not necessarily complicated to use and run these reports. And yeah, quick question. You guys have any questions about the inventory? Because it's one that it's there, it works, but there's not much details attached to it other than the opening balance. The measures are all there. I don't know if you guys had any questions related to the inventory UDM, but it's really there to be able to connect multiple data points into one to be able to make decisions faster. Okay, so let me just see right here. Dennis, I'm not sure about that question. So Dennis asked the question, is there an option to add future productions to it? I'd have to get back to you on that one right there because I'm not sure. It's a very good question, but I will reach out to you directly when I do have that answer, since I do talk to you almost every week. Very good question, but I'm not sure about that question, sadly. Is there any other questions for now? You guys can always feel free if you guys have any additional questions about any of can I show the aging of the, okay, you're asking if you can see the aging. Let me see right here. But what aging are you asking for, Dinesh? Are you talking about the financial inventory aging? Okay, let me just see. Okay, I can show it to you, but I'm not sure if it's still available in the templates right now, but I'll just run it on this date right here on 2017 or 2018 because my data is not up to date for this right here. And let me just click confirm. So I wasn't sure if you're talking about aging of the APAR and so on. But right here, basically based on that date, it shows you 30 days or less, the stock and the kind of like the movement with that aging information right here. So basically on that given date that we used as that parameter, it's going to give you the aging of that inventory inside the system. So how old the inventory that we have is there inside the system. So it shows you the age of that information. But it's using the FIFO standard. I'm not sure if it's in the final one, but I'd have to get back to you on that one. But it's just to see really how old your inventory is inside the system. But yet again, it's using some of the similar measures that we had, but this one's right here. It's mostly on 30 days, 31. So it's using a bucket of ranges that's inside of here to show you how old your inventory is. Perfect. Okay. So what I'm going to do, since the time is coming up, I'm just going to show up the PowerPoint again. And we did the Q&A side. So let me just hide this right here. And I believe Olivia is back with us. So let me just go back to the presentation. And if you guys have any questions after all this, feel free to contact us and we'll be glad to answer anything that you have. So let me let Olivia speak.
Thanks, Jean-Guy. I hope that the session went really well today. I know I made a mistake earlier at the beginning of the session. There is one more session coming up. And again, it will be Jean-Guy. And I believe he's going to be presenting on the data sync as well as like the version 9 new enhancements. And that's going to be Tuesday, June 9th at 2 p.m. So we hope to see you all back. I hope that you got a lot out of today's session. Again, it's being recorded. It will be shared with you guys once all of the sessions have been complete. The last thing I just wanted to say, again, as I mentioned, we do have a promotion going on licenses. So if anyone's interested in expanding the use of Nectari within your organization or would like to take advantage of some of the ETL modules that we now have with version 9, please reach out to me. In regards to upgrades, for those of you who are interested in upgrading to version 9, you may not have had the chance to do so already, but start taking advantage of some of the new features, and you'll see more about that in the next session. But please as well contact me. I'll send your details and your email over to our Director of Services, Nick, who can assist with coordinating those upgrades. So again, please don't hesitate to contact me and I'll put you in touch with the right people or person. And on that note, I wish everybody a wonderful rest of their day. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope the weather's warm so everyone can spend some time outside. And we'll see you hopefully back next week for the V9 Delta and Data Sync training. Have a great day, everyone.